title, Can't Live With Them, Can't Live Without Them, the impact of AI, algorithms, social media, general sort of new tech paradigms on people's everyday lives. This is an ongoing conversation, of course, that's taking place currently in the design community and the broader context as well. But it's one that's really important, so we're gonna keep running events on this and like bringing people with interesting case studies and interesting thoughts on the topics to come and speak about them in public, and for us to get the opportunity to debate that with them. And for us to educate ourselves, right, in these topics and see how we want to act as designers ourselves in our everyday lives, right, to take these into account. So with that, welcome our speakers today. We are going to have 3 individual presentations at the beginning from Michelle, Carney, Jan King, and Jason Carmel. Then we're going to have a little Q&A panel session, so we're going to hold the questions after each presentation till the end, and then we're going to bring all the speakers up on stage again and going to ask questions and invite audience participation at that point, and we're going to have a little bit more opportunity to dig in deeper at that point as well and ask questions from your side, from my side, and everybody, even the speakers with each other. And then we're going to have, Stephanie Lucas here as well from LinkedIn. She's going to run a little workshop, an interactive exercise at the end to round up the evening. And that's optional for anybody who's interested in participating. It's a really cool workshop that Stephanie has actually been leading at LinkedIn internally, where they follow sort of like the bad actors framework, right, and find out sort of how can they prevent misuse and abuse of systems. So that's going to be the interactive exercise that we're all going to do together at the end, and you're invited to participate. All right, so with that, I'll invite our first speaker, Michelle Carney. I'll let you introduce, your bio is interesting and rich, so I'll let you introduce yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniela. Hi, y'all. I am Michelle. I think the bio that I sent you was, I am a computational neuroscientist turned UXer. But my background's actually computational neuroscience. I'm here to talk a little bit about the work that I do for machine learning UX, specifically around what are we doing in terms of hosting a meetup around machine learning UX. We've now grown to about 1,700 members. Some free resources that you can then take back to your arsenal too, as like designers in the field and like the exciting future of designing for machine learning. And also we have a course where all the materials are up, posted online too, that we just taught at the Stanford dSchool. So that's all I will be covering. Yes, my whatever tweet handle is Michelle R, like radios or the programming language, Carney. So yes, like I mentioned, hi, I'm Michelle. I do UX and data science at Amazon Music. I'm not talking about any of my Amazon stuff here today, unfortunately, because I have too many other cool things to cover. But I'm the founder and organizer of the Machine Learning UX Meetup. I'm a lecturer at the Stanford dSchool. Previously, I was a computational neuroscientist and UX researcher, UI engineer. I kind of like have bounced around. I've done a little bit of it all. So I'm really stoked to be up here sharing my experience with you all and hopefully inspire you that you too can design for machine learning. Yeah? Yeah? Okay, I see a couple nods. Yes, it works. Oh, why didn't show the rest of the slide? No, just kidding. Cool. So first thing I always get asked is like, cool, machine learning UX. I was just told you are probably one of a kind. There must not be a lot of people like you. What is that? Those are 2 separate job categories. Well, how I like to describe it is how do we use data to inform and drive UX design decisions, so like data science techniques, statistical inference, all that stuff, but also how do we think about UX as a way to enable future machine learning models, collect data from models that we don't have yet, but also make it transparent to your end user about what the capabilities of the models are, what information is currently like had in the state, how to give the user control of the model, like all those really, really important questions. Also just like very high level summary, I know that I just have UX data up there, but like UX is, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but UX is more than just visual design. It's all about interaction design, UX copywriting, information architecture, voice user interface design. That's what I do a lot of at Amazon. And data as well. I've just boiled it all up there. Data, done. But it could be AI, machine learning, even statistical inference, data science, all that stuff. How do we bring these 2 disciplines together and have them actually work to solve real user problems? That's kind of what we're talking about today. And when we actually bring them together, we get really cool experiences like this. So on the right, left, right, one, there's Pinterest. So Pinterest is doing something really cool here, right? It's a visual search, so as you go through, you see an image. I have no idea what they were searching for. I read the PR thing. Searching for beaches and pizzas, but then they're like, no, I want pizzas. And then it reseeds the search in the interface itself and brings up a bunch of images similar to pizza, right? That's a really cool machine learning model, right? That's thinking, oh, hey, what are other similar images that exist in this data set, like that are user-generated data sets that probably aren't labeled very well because we don't really label our Pinterest data very well, but how can we help you find other pins that are similar to that when you're searching for that? Also things like type ahead and the Google keyboard and click-draw auto-draw. I'll be talking about that in a little bit too. So these are the types of experiences that I'm really excited about, and I hope that you get excited about too. So, yes, like I mentioned, I am the founder and organizer of the Machine Learning UX Meetup. We have, I think, close to 1,700 members now. So we host a bunch of cool technical talks. Look, you too can be this happy just like the rest of us. But we really try to have talks about, hey, who's working in this space, what are emerging technologies, how do we share best practices, how do we take that back to our team and like be really excited about this. So the next morning at our team stand-up, we're like, yes, I saw this great talk and this is what I learned. So really taking that practice back with us and also meeting other folks in the field who are practicing in this space, because it is a new emerging technology of like suddenly being a UX designer tasked to design AI systems. So how do we learn from each other? So speaking about that, when I first started organizing the group, there were no job postings. That was about 2 years ago. Now we have job postings, like IDEO, which is a design organization, has a data science arm. Like what? That's so cool. This is awesome. Also, we're seeing jobs like here, this one at Apple, senior UX UI designer, to bridge the gap between design and machine learning. This is super exciting. I don't know if you all feel this, but like 2 years ago, this was not a job thing. Like I was applying for jobs, people were like, those don't go together. They do. So I'm really excited about this future, and I think that it's really important as designers in the room, we know how to design for AI and machine learning systems. And so one of the things that I did in all of my free time, besides working full-time at Amazon, is I started teaching at the Stanford dSchool, which is the School of Design. All these materials are free and up online too, so I'll tweet about this afterwards, but we created a course called Designing Machine Learning, which is all about how can we get other folks in the room understanding what parts of machine learning can be designed, not just taking the model at face value, but understanding that there's a bunch of design decisions that go into creating the end output number, like where's your data from, how did you clean it, what type of model are you using, how did you evaluate that model? So really breaking it down, creating that shared vocabulary. So like this, where's your data, all this stuff. Look, isn't it fun and approachable? Look, supervised and unsupervised learning both fit this pattern. So creating that shared vocabulary, we were actually half technical folks from like Google Brain, Apple Computer Vision, and then not technical folks from like education, psychology, design, architecture. Yeah, it was just really, really cool. Doctors, yeah, getting everybody in the room, if you're not familiar with dSchool classes, and having them co-create how the future of machine learning might look. We also created interactive notebooks as well. I don't think I can click that. Okay, well, so one thing that we also created too is just interactive notebooks that you can go through. This is all up online and free, and I will tweet about this. But if you're interested in kind of understanding, hey, what parts of machine learning can be designed, what happens if I clean my data in certain ways, this is a sample of like a decision tree if we're trying to predict if an animal is furry or not. The computer found the optimal path to be, the first split is, does the animal have less than or equal to 2.5 legs? I don't know about you, that is not the split that I would do if I was looking at a data set. So helping us understand like why computers might make certain decisions versus other decisions, that kind of stuff. So we created all these resources, also a lot of work around mapping guides and context around AI ethics and stuff too. All this is up online. We also created a set of cards called I Love Algorithms, which is all about like, hey, how do we figure out what types of algorithms exist in the world, similar to like IDEO type design kit cards, and actually using them for design solutions. And something that we did learn in the process, we found that it was super valuable to just kind of demystify what is machine learning and AI. Also creating a shared vocab, like I mentioned, between machine learning and UX, and all these other different disciplines. Talking about what parts of machine learning can be designable, and just even low fidelity machine learning prototyping. I'm just kind of putting that out there. How do you do research, like UX research on machine learning models before they're built yet? We actually had the students go through that. That's a huge other side of this slide deck that we're not going to get into, but it's an exciting feature because as designers of these systems, you can treat it like a similar system as you would with other user research, but think about, hey, what are the inputs and outputs of this model? How do I simulate that in a Wizard of Oz test or something like that? And actually make sure that we are designing the right type of machine learning model that the users are expecting. Yes, and ultimately how to design machine learning for people. That's what we are here to do. So I want to talk very quickly about some resources and then I'll move into a case study if that's cool. So some of my favorite articles, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this one. This was by Jess Holbrook and Josh Lovejoy, but it's human-centered machine learning. It came out like 2 years ago. This is actually what kicked off like me being like, yeah, there are other people in the world interested in this and we should totally start a meetup. So if you're not familiar, totally recommend checking this out. They go through kind of like different questions you should ask yourself when designing human-centered machine learning. And Microsoft actually just released at CHI this year the guidelines for human-AI interaction and fun, approachable cards as well. And again, I'll tweet all these out, so if you want to go look into them in more detail. I know this is kind of like drinking from a fire hose of all these resources, but I'm hoping that something sticks and you take it back to your team. But the thing that I really like about this, that I really want to call out, is that they broke it down into, initially, when you first have the system, what are some things in an AI and machine learning system that you should be thinking about? Like, make it clear what the system can do, stuff like that. Including during the interaction, what do you do when the machine learning system is wrong? How do you correct it? How do you have the user feel like they have control of the system? And then how does it change over time? I think that's another really interesting thing too, that we are going to be encountering as designers. Just about like, hey, how the system is not just a static design anymore, it's probabilistic. How will it look like in a week, in a month? What is it going to look like when we add new features to it? That kind of stuff too. So super recommend checking these out. Also, Josh Lovejoy recently just published another human-centered AI cheat sheet, which is also composing of a bunch of really great questions that you can ask yourself while you go through and design these systems. And last but not least, there's the People in AI Guidebook. How many of you are familiar with this? No? Oh, a couple? Oh, I'm so excited this is a gift to you. I think this is great. They've really gone through, over at the Google People in AI research team, thinking about like, hey, what are the different ways that we should be thinking about AI systems, how to design for them, everything from like user needs and defining success to mental models and trust and explainability. And if all these terms are kind of new to you, you've heard them in the space, but you're interested in learning more, this is a really great resource to just kind of dive deep into what does this mean and think about how it actually applies to your practice. So I have written my own key tenets. I've synthesized all of these into what I actually use on my day-to-day job at Amazon. So one of the first things I always ask myself is, do we actually need our help for this? I think there was a really great case study by the Gmail team where they gave the example of when you type "see attached" or if I've included it as an attachment, it then pops up if you haven't attached it saying, you didn't actually attach anything, FYI. Is that machine learning? No, that's just like a logic system. Like, oh my gosh, but it feels very smart, feels like a seamless system. But machine learning actually can cost a lot of money, can be breakable to outliers and stuff too. So can you think of another way to approach this that also makes it more explainable to your end user, kind of what's going on, so they would understand and it still has the value? And I think that's also true to Selena and the Microsoft team's tenets about like giving like immediate feedback when someone has given you information. You don't need logic or you don't need machine learning all the time to be like, yes, here I've done a machine learning model and like this is the output after you've given me feedback. You could just use logic and be like, great, you really like Selena Gomez. Here's an album by Selena Gomez, like stuff like that. Reinforcing customers' mental models is also really important. While machine learning can do a bunch of really cool, interesting things, make sure that you're not building an experience where they have to go out of their way in order to understand what it is. Make sure you're meeting them where they're at. And so whatever they're thinking the system should be able to do, does the machine learning model actually adapt to that, the recommendations that it gives, all that stuff. I think also leveraging transparency, earning trust, and designing for control and feedback can also be very important, especially when we need to design to fail gracefully. So machine learning by its nature is probabilistic. So there will always be edge cases when it's wrong. So how do you use that for opportunities to get feedback about the system for future features that you don't even have yet? And get that feedback and be like, oh, how about this? No, that's not right? Great. Thanks for the feedback. Here's something else instead. So thinking about our designs not as just static one images, but actually as a couple of different options. And also something that's just really important is always validate the UX before the model too. So that really is like, are we building the right experience? Is this something that will benefit the users? Is it something that adds value to their life, not something that will make it more frustrating? Just because you have a really cool machine learning model that does really cool stuff, is it actually helping them solve their problems? So those are kind of my key tenets that I try to stay true to when I do my work. I'm gonna switch over really fast to a fun case study if that's cool. Yeah? It was kind of like drinking like a fire hose? Okay. Okay, so I have a couple of different case studies. How many of you are familiar with quick draw, auto draw? A couple? Oh, wow. Oops. Back. Okay. Okay, so quick draw, auto draw was a really fun game that came out of Google Creative Labs. Does this look familiar to anyone? Yeah, a couple of you? Great. So if you're not familiar, you will quickly catch on. It's a neural network trying to recognize your doodles. So you have 20 seconds to draw a floor lamp. My drawing is not very good, especially on computers and especially when I'm public speaking, so let's be nice to me, okay? So draw a floor lamp. Oh, I see a triangle, I see an arrow, I see a pillow, I see a square, I see a postcard, I see a suitcase, I see a mailbox. Oh, it's a floor lamp, yeah. So what is actually happening in this system, right? I'm drawing a series of vectors. Vectors like are the actual lines and shapes, and there's an order to them, an order in which they're presented, and the neural network then gets labeled data. It now has captured that and can have like 150,000 different representations about how people would draw floor lamps, octopi. This is all the different octopi, which is probably my favorite doodle because it has so much variation. Like, what is this? There's no head. So, but this is actually really, really brilliant because they've designed a system where they are getting labeled data from us in a fun, approachable game, and they can do a bunch of really cool things with it. So for instance, you can now peruse all these great, like you can see like the order matters of what shapes are drawn first in terms of the vectors, but also you can draw anything. So I'm gonna draw a lightning bolt. It's turning it into an octopus, what? So this is an octopus recurrent neural network too. Let's clear this. So if I wanted to do this one, oh look, it drew a smiley face. Yeah, so it'll go through a bunch of different iterations in that recurrent neural network of trained on all of this data of how people have drawn octopi and try to recreate an octopi from whatever image I give it. But that's not all. Oh, but wait, there's more. So the last thing that I really love too is auto draw. I can just start drawing. So this is kind of like, I want to say like Clippy 4.0. It's like really, really cool. So I start drawing this. I start drawing this. Is it gonna? Oh, it is a paperclip up there. No. Is it? Oh, look! It knows that I'm drawing an octopus. What? It's so smart. But that was like what? 3 lines, 3 vectors in, right? And it's already like then I could say octopus party. Yay! So there, you guys are all invited to my octopus party. But you can imagine, like, what if this was in a more updated system? You were using this within your presentation system, Google Slides, PowerPoint, whatever. You wanted a quick image, and you're like, oh, I can roughly draw a lamp or something, an octopus. It can then auto-complete it to a bunch of different things, and that it has a ton more stuff than just octopi and lamps too. But I would love for you to take this back to your practice in terms of like, oh, how do I actually think about these systems in a broader context? Oh, this is not it. Is it this one? It closed. Yes. Well, here. Try pulling it up. So, okay. I think the most important thing from that is it really showcases the power of repackaging machine learning, a fun interactive game that's a machine learning system, repackaging it in a bunch of different ways that I think is really, really cool. And
sorry,
okay.
Just keep talking.
Yeah. Oh, yes. thank you for your patience with this. Can you go all the way to the end? Oh, good. Well, remember, you can have so much fun. Oh, cool. Look at all the stuff. Okay. Okay. Cool. Wow. We learned so much. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Key tenants. Oh wow. Is this reinforcing that you learned? Okay. We did this case study. Great. So what's next? This is the part that I'm really excited about. We're already seeing roles pop up for machine learning prototypers. We're seeing roles be shifted from data scientists to decision scientists, incorporating user research, qualitative research, as well as quantitative. So more than just mixed methods, but like when we do the quantitative, is it validated by the qualitative? UX data scientist, that's already a role of the data scientist embedded within a UX org. Mixed methods researcher, of course, data designers, there's roles like that at Fjord already. And I wanted to just say, all of us are invited. Don't be afraid of machine learning systems and everything too. If you're interested, we do host free events. Our next one is actually at the Salesforce Tower, July 25th on AI for social good and nonprofits. So how do we approach machine learning UX systems there? And we record all of our talks as well. So if you're interested in how to do quantitative UX research, unsupervised learning methods for data-driven personas, or how do you design and use data science ethically, we have talks on all of those things. You can check us out too at meetup.com/MLUXSF, and our Twitter handle is MLUXSF too. But just want you to all know, thank you so much for listening, and I hope that, I know this was a lot of resources, but I really hope that you're able to take back something to your team and use it in your practice. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Wonderful. And next up, we're going to have Jen King, who is also going to introduce herself. But she's at the Stanford Law School at the Center for Internet and Society, as you can see. You ready to go?
I need my notes, I'm sorry. So, computer here, computer there. So yes, I am Jen King. So I'm at the Center for Internet Society at Stanford Law School, but I am not a lawyer. I actually have a PhD in human computer interactions, so I'm kind of a duck out of the water there. And what I do is I study privacy. I've been researching privacy for 15 years now. And so my talk's a bit different than Michelle's, much higher level. So I'm going to talk a bit about how the internet has evolved from a place where we used to just share information, really was a focus expanding time and space, to a tool for what I consider to be pretty in-depth surveillance. I'm going to talk about surveillance capitalism, which I'll go into more in a minute, which is something you may have heard of recently, and how we've kind of evolved at this point and what we might do to turn it around. Okay, so I want to take you back literally 20 years, 1999. How many of you have read Nielsen's book? Yeah, I read it when it came out, back in 1999. And it was very transformative to me. I think it's the first thing I read on web usability back in the day. And it really taught me that there was this field that I could get into. And so, internet privacy in 1999 was in some ways very different than it is today, and actually in some ways very similar. We're still concerned about cookies. How many of you are from the EU, or broadly? So you know, you've been forced to deal with cookie notices for several years now. And those of you who visit internet websites in the EU, forced to accept cookies, very blatantly. That's a policy decision by EU regulators. One of the biggest hot topics back in 1999 were privacy policies. There's still a hot topic today, although not an exciting one. That's definitely an area I study. But certainly not something that most of you probably spend any time thinking about or reading. Spam was really the issue of the day as well. And with that was a real huge concern with companies actually getting our names, our email addresses, and our postal addresses. That was really kind of in 1999, the big concern that we were going to be outed as human beings and you could actually figure it out where we lived, where we existed in real space. That's the year that Scott McNeely of Sun had his most famous statement on privacy. You have zero privacy anyway, get over it. That's been quoted 6 billion times ever since. So things look very different in 1999, yet there were still things that I think we're going to see are really relevant today. So one of the things, around web regulation, and it was really, really strong in that there was a huge focus on not regulating the internet. And so that, I think, in some ways is where we got ourselves into, I would argue, the mess that we're in today. This is a quote from Orson Swindle, who has the best name. He was a former commissioner of the Federal Trade Commission. And he was really focusing in a report they issued back in '99, again saying, don't regulate the internet. You're going to harm innovation. You're going to harm creativity. You're going to stifle what this thing could be. And really what it comes up to is that it's a free market, and you all should individually be able to look at a privacy policy and determine for yourself whether or not you want to do business with this company. And that was really the focus of what privacy meant back in '99. Again, how many of you read privacy policies on a regular basis? Right. There's a real reason why you probably don't, which is they don't tell you anything. So this whole notion that you could be this informed consumer and carefully look at what these different companies are doing with your data and be able to make decisions as a result of that, that was the whole premise of the internet policy back then. And I would argue in that sense it's failed. We're not at a point where we can all take however many minutes it might actually take us to read privacy policies on a daily basis and make these informed choices. And in preparing for this talk, I was doing a search and I found this editorial that was posted on The Economist. It wasn't by an author I recognized, but I thought it was pretty spot on. And I'll just read the key quote, which is, 20 years hence, meaning today, most people will find that the privacy they take for granted today will be just as elusive as the privacy of the 1970s now seems. Just to say that there were a number of people really thinking ahead on these issues even 20 years ago. And I think 20 years now in the future, we have to ask ourselves, is this really the future we want to build? Is the way we experience the internet today, the way we are tracked pretty much everywhere we go, is this how we want to continue on? Basically, in 20 years, we've gone from an internet where we had the beginnings of those features to one where they're pretty much built in. And what I would argue is that we've allowed ourselves to evolve along this path, but I would say we're not all the way there yet, meaning that I think there's still the means to switch gears and do something different. And so one of the biggest differences in the last 20 years is, some of you may have seen some of the executives testifying, is that we've gone from no regulation to please regulate me at all costs, please. We've seen Facebook say it, Twitter, Google, Microsoft, all the big companies now are screaming about regulation. And what they're telling us in the public is that they actually want it. They want to see the internet regulated. In some sense, this is kind of it's not exactly disingenuous, but it's more because the European Union has really forced the issue. So many of you have probably seen GDPR notices, or maybe you've heard about the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. And basically what's happened is by passing that law, Europe has become a privacy regulator for really most of the world at this point. And so what we're seeing in the US is basically a response to say, hey, you better do something, otherwise we're going to be basically regulated by the Europeans. Does anybody else know about the California law that just passed this last year? Cool. So that goes into effect in January 2020. And so we do have a new privacy law in California. It's, in my opinion, pretty inadequate, but it's also forcing the issue because what we have are tech companies looking around saying, okay, we have the Europeans on one hand saying, or basically kind of forcing the issue of privacy regulation. Now we have California, and all we have to do now is watch state by state, other states adopt these laws. And then suddenly we have an extreme patchwork of different privacy regulations that companies have to deal with around both the globe and within the US. So, a lot of this, I think, is in reaction to the sense that things have really gotten out of control. So this is the famous slide, you may have seen this, of the internet ecosystem, the internet advertising ecosystem, which if you follow this slide over the years, I think the earliest version of this is 2010. It's just phenomenal. It's the way it's grown year by year by year. And what we see as consumers is that there's just not, you can't really draw a straight line through this. You use an app on your phone, and there are any number of parties collecting data about you, and there's no clear way for you to figure out who's collecting what, where, when, what. Even if you try to decompose, you try to do the work as a consumer and look through your permissions on on an app, for example, it's a mess. So there's just this increasing sense that there are so many players in the system, and the complexity has gotten so enormous that things are really stacked up against consumers. And so, how many of you have heard of the term surveillance capitalism? Cool, quite a few. So, it's because of this book, which just came out beginning of this year, I think back in February, by Professor Shoshana Zuboff. She's a professor at Harvard Business School. Actually, she's a retired professor at Harvard Business School. And so I really recommend reading this if this is an area you're interested in at all. Keeping in mind the book is 700 pages, so it's not a light weekend read, but if you're a commuter, you can probably get it out over a week or two on BART or Caltrain. And one of the things I would say is that she's really put together a compelling narrative around what went wrong. And so whether you agree or disagree with her, I'll give you a quick summary. I mean, what she really, her primary culprit is Google in most of the looking around where we went from around 1999 forward. And what she said, or what she argues is that right around the dot-com boom, basically as display advertising dried up, traditional, at that point, traditional advertising, as we thought about it, back in 2001 on the internet, really went belly up with the collapse of the internet here in the Bay Area. And so she really points the finger at Google for really realizing early on that there was money to be made in our data exhaust, all the ways in which we leave trails. It wasn't just that we were searching for a product at the time, it was also looking at all these other contextual factors related to the research. And it was Google that really began capitalizing on that data. I actually worked at Yahoo back at that era, before Yahoo sucked. The places that I worked at Yahoo, people did that. And absolutely, I could say, having been in that world back then and observing Google from afar, like they really did pick up on those issues much sooner. Certainly Yahoo didn't pick up on it, where they ended up. But she really decomposes this, and I think one of the things she really points out is just how much power has become a key feature in how we relate to the internet, how we relate to large tech companies. It's no longer just this question of being able to look at an individual website and saying, hey, I'm going to make a decision to sign up, and do I have any other options? Do I read the terms and conditions? Do I actually read the privacy policy? So much of this stuff is basically stacked up against consumers that you really have no choice. Go ahead and sign it, move on, and kind of see that some amount of your data is going to be collected. And so what she's really arguing is that this is moving far beyond a world where we're just looking at ads and we're just being persuaded to buy things. The next level of this is AI. It's the more immersive experience of not just what you look at on a phone, but also everywhere you go, what you invite back into your home, how you allow these different technologies to kind of enter in your personal space, whether it's Amazon Alexa, or it's a Google Home, or a Ring doorbell, all these different technologies that we're inviting into these different spaces in our lives. She's very concerned about that in particular. And I think just the debates around privacy and AI, I think in particular, has really brought a lot of this to the forefront. It's no longer just this fringe thing, no, privacy. People are beginning to realize there's actually some things that it's. And so, what can we do? What can designers do? So what I would argue is that it's really time, I think, for designers to really step up and exert their power as a design community. So my experience having worked at Yahoo and other startups in the past was that designers always worked as kind of internal consultants. Like, you swooped in and you got brought onto a project. You didn't necessarily own that project from beginning to end. You kind of got brought in and said, oh, let's make it look good, let's make things work. But that you didn't really have a voice in the entire process. I'm hoping that's changed, because I've been in academia for quite a while now. But has it changed? A little bit? Yeah, okay. In the past, it certainly didn't used to be that way. So I think having a more active role in that process is a really big piece of it. But I think is that we also need to see more of a coalescence around issues with ethics. And certainly AI has brought ethics to the forefront. There's so many discussions today about AI and ethics. is that beyond just being aware of these issues, the design community really needs to professionalize around these issues. Whether it's that you are part of an organization, you are part of a union. I don't think designers unionize, but I'll just throw it out there. And less that it's just about educating yourselves, but also that you have kind of an explicit code of conduct. I think that's really important because in conversations I've had around design and ethics, a lot of pressure I think is put on designers as representatives of the user. You have to go out and fight for the user, even if it's completely in contradiction to what your business wants you to do. And I think that in order to be able to do that, you need to be able to point at something and say, this is what my design community tells me I have to do. Just the same way a doctor, for example, is bound by precepts of ethical practice. And a doctor can be unlicensed, licensed, I think is the right word, if they break those laws or break those agreements. In some ways, I think the design community might need to move towards something like that, so that you can say, it's not just me making this argument that you should do better. Like the entire design community has come out and said, we need to practice these particular ethics when it comes to machine learning or privacy. And it kind of takes the pressure, I think, off individual designers to take that fight themselves and be able to say, my entire practitioner community agrees with this. And frankly, if I didn't do this professionally, I wouldn't find a job at the next place I tried to work. No one would hire me. Actually tacked my name to some huge screw-up by company X. As an experiment once, actually, I went through and tried to track what happened to different people who worked on design features that ended up with enforcements by the Federal Trade Commission. And I was not surprised to see that most of the people, I don't think, suffered any professional consequences. So you can basically break people's trust, cost your company millions upon millions of dollars, force them to operate under a consent decree, and it doesn't actually hurt you, which is kind of amazing to me. I think things are changing, in my sense. But on that note, I'm going to bring up one particular area where this is happening, but I would argue it really needs your help as a community writ large, which is privacy by design. So even before AI became a thing, privacy by design has been this growing movement, really started by Anne Kaloukian, who was the former privacy commissioner of Ontario in Canada. She started it, and it's taken off, but it's really been more of an engineering concern. And so we've seen an uptake of this concept of privacy by design among engineering ethics and engineering communities. So there's entire degree programs now focused on privacy and engineering, for example. I don't think we see this in the design space. You can tell me if I'm wrong. I haven't. And it's something like when I got my PhD at Berkeley, something we definitely tried to focus on at Berkeley at the School of Information. But for the most part, the design and privacy by design is pretty much being defined by engineers at this point and lawyers. So this is an area I would argue that the design community could come in and really actually kind of take it and say, look, we're going to define what design really means in this context and make sure it's more focused on kind of human-centric values rather than computer science values of privacy, meaning is data confidential or is it not confidential? It's a very binary way of looking at things. So to wrap up, the point I want to make is that even if you haven't been kind of interested in engaging with things like ethics or policy, it's coming for you. And here's the first example. This is a bill that is currently put up by Senator Warner and Deb Fisher. So this is the Detour Act. Now, it may not pass. Like many bills that get introduced, it may just wither away. But this is an explicit bill that's looking at dark patterns. I'm pretty sure most of you probably know what dark patterns are at this point. It's a term that's been bouncing around for almost a decade, but it's gotten a lot more purchase as of late. This bill specifically is looking to try to do a few things. If I ever get my act together, I will finally publish my write-up on this, but I haven't been able to do it. Of course, as soon as I do, they'll probably pull it. But to give you a quick summary, what they are trying to do is to outlaw very specific forms of interaction. Really, if you go through this thing, what they're trying to do is get YouTube to stop autoplay. That's like key piece number one. They're going after Facebook for their emotional contagion study. They're trying to outlaw the use of any kind of design testing without explicit user consent. So it doesn't, I don't think it will outlaw A/B testing. They try to write that in as an exception. But if you try to actually conduct any kind of emotional behavioral testing as a designer under this bill, it would be illegal without having explicit consent from all of your users. And I think the way it's written right now, this is my interpretation, and those people might argue with me, but I actually would argue that it kind of forces us into a world of opt-in, which I actually think is kind of not so bad. But any case where you would collect the user data from an individual, if the way I've interpreted this is correct, basically you would force you to get an opt-in consent rather than what's today considered the norm, opt-out. So again, this may not have any future, but this is the first, and I will argue that we will absolutely see more. And if you watched the Zuckerberg hearings, for example, and came away with any sense of kind of despair around how much our members of Congress understand about technology, just wait until they start legislating design. It's going to be a problem. So if nothing else, just know that I think the time to just kind of like, who cares about this stuff, it's really past. And so if we're going to change, if you don't like the way things are going from a privacy point of view as a designer, if you're concerned about being regulated and what you can do, the time is really to stand up and finally like organize and think about what we can do as a group of us. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. That was wonderful. So we're getting all the different dimensions here covered, from machine learning and designing for it to privacy and surveillance capitalism. And now we're going to go on to another fun topic, hate speech. So it's a really fun presentation, so I'm really looking forward, and we're going to have a great discussion afterward.
Thank you. Hi. My name is Jason Carmel. I am, as the slide professes, the Chief Data Officer at a company called Possible, which is now a company called Wunderman Thompson. Agencies are weird. That's my Twitter handle, if Twitter is still relevant to you all. And this topic is a lot about Twitter, so I hope it is. Let's see, I should point it over to where the computer is. There it is. So it is, first, it's probably a fair question to wonder who is this jackass and why is he here at a design conference if he is a chief data officer at an ad agency. We make ads. I mean, we do more than that, obviously, but like we have clients for whom we do advertising, whether it be Microsoft or Volkswagen and gajillions in between. So why am I here talking really about design and ML? And the reason is because I was actually presented with a design problem. This whole thing that I'm going to walk you through was presented initially by a design problem. A designer came up to me and said, I have a question. Remember that. Remember that, what I just said, because we're going to come back to that. And this was it. This was after Charlottesville about a year and a half ago, and all the March of Tiki Torches and all that nonsense. And he was sad. It was a very human moment. He was sad at what was happening. He was a colleague of mine. And then he read this article about this town in Germany called, and the details I'll get a little wrong, but it's a small town, and it has the ignoble fact of having a grave marker of a famous Nazi. And so every year for that Nazi's birthday, neo-Nazis would come march through the town every year. And this is a small town in Germany, and they didn't want that. Like, oh God, there's just a graveyard there. We don't want it. And so they didn't know what to do with it either. Do we throw eggs at them? Do we just shutter everything down and don't pay attention to them? It feels like either way they felt like they would lose. They would either be aggressive and they didn't want to fight fire with that kind of fire, or they would be perceived as weak and just like, we're not going to pay attention to it. So they came up with a super clever workaround, which is, we're actually going to cheer for them. We're going to turn it into a walkathon. And for every meter that a neo-Nazi walks, they would sponsor that neo-Nazi, and the proceeds would be donated to an organization in Germany that fights to help people get out of hate groups. So for every step that the neo-Nazi would take, they would in essence be funding their own destruction. It was brilliant. Human design at its best. You see here, this is my favorite thing, they actually set up water stations and banana stations for the neo-Nazis. They would cheer them on. Like, yeah, go! And then they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to process that kind of trolling. It was 8-dimensional chess. And my designer friend, he's like, could we do something like that for? I have this idea. I want to do something like that for Twitter, where every time somebody says something nasty about another group of people, that if somebody retweets it, money goes to fund groups that support love. I'm like, wow, what a great idea. He goes, yeah, so we're just going to do this by ourselves. And I'm like, that's a lot of hate speech that you're going to have to man. Maybe we could figure out a way to build something for you. And it was that little hint where a designer asked a data person about something, where suddenly things happen. So that's the payoff for that thing. Remember that. That's important. And you know this is actually, Jen just referenced this, about how you can watch YouTube and eventually you'll see a right-wing, just a hate speech, full on. And that's a problem. We don't want to kill Twitter. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. But it's bad. The problem is getting worse as people sort of learn how to use this. Social media is a great tool for everybody, including jerky white nationalists, as it turns out. And so these white nationalists have been weaponizing social media to spread hate to corners where they historically haven't been able to go. And the numbers are insanely bad. This was taken from the ADL a year and a half ago, and this is just anti-Semitic hate speech. 2.5 million tweets about hate speech over the course of a year. That's 10 billion people seeing that. Media impressions, so to speak. I know, yeah, it's cute, right? That's because I wanted to say, I like the data, as a data guy, I know the data you get, okay, hate speech is proliferating, but I also know that hate is a very visceral thing. If you've experienced it, it hits you right here. And so I wanted to show you examples of hate speech, but I wanted to warn you before I did, because this stuff is vile. And it's happening. So if you've ever experienced it, and it's the sort of thing where you would likely get upset by it, I just want you to know that. But if you haven't, and you haven't seen it, I think it's useful to just see the kind of stuff that is on Twitter currently. All right, let's take a break. Let's breathe a little bit, so unclench the bowel, so to speak. So it's hard stuff, and there are two things that I find fascinating about that, and not in a good way. The first is that I didn't pull these tweets from like 1954. As it turns out, Twitter wasn't around then, but I didn't. This was from the past year. These are people who are posting these thoughts over the past 12 months. The second thing is this, that this one, 71 people liked it, and 21 people repeated it. And for us, that was the design problem. It's like, people are going to say this junk a lot, but people are spreading it too. People are looking at it and go, yeah, you know, right? Jews can't understand what it's like to tell the truth. Zing, that's the problem. That was the problem for us. And so we started this, I don't know what it is, a technology, a platform. It's called We Counter Hate. And it is designed to identify hate speech on Twitter. And then we score it on how toxic it is. And then when we see how toxic it is, we take the really, really gnarly ones and we counter it. And as it turns out, when you counter a tweet on Twitter, the tweeter can't delete that. It's stuck there. I don't know whether it's a bug or a feature of Twitter, but it exists. And we exploited it. It was awesome. So some jerk would post something like that, and we would respond to this, and it would be the first thing that anybody who wants to see the conversation about that would see. And the idea is to then give the person who's looking at this conversation, to give them a choice. You can either not retweet this, or you can retweet it and $1 will be donated to an organization that fights hate. And the organization we partnered with is a group called We Counter Hate, not as Life After Hate, excuse me. They're a bunch of former extremists themselves who are there basically to help people get out of that destructive lifestyle. They're amazing people. And so,
sorry, retweet what? The tweet itself?
The tweets. Yeah, retweet, if they retweet the hate speech.
But isn't that spreading the hate speech?
No, we are giving them a choice. So if they retweet, they will either retweet the hate speech or not. If they retweet the hate speech, we will donate $1 to the organization that's fighting them.
Got it. You're not encouraging them.
We are not encouraging them to spread hate
If they
speech.
do, they automatically donate.
That's right. If they retweet, $1 goes toward an organization that's trying to actually help them get out of hate speech. Otherwise, you're right, it would be a little silly.
Yeah.
So thank you for helping clarify that. So the whole point of this is to lead with this thought of, okay, you may be allowed, but you're not welcome. You're like, okay, you're allowed to say a lot of stuff on Twitter, but just because you're allowed to say stuff like that doesn't mean you're welcome. I don't know if many of you recognize this, given or if it's deep enough in pop cultural that you all recognize it. But this is Archie Bunker, and he is from a television show All in the Family. He's a noted racist. And also, I think everybody has in their family kind of that Uncle Archie who will stroll into a Thanksgiving dinner and say, hey, you're going to love this. A Jew and a black guy walk into a bar. And then all of the people of the following generation just sort of roll their eyes. Oh, God, here comes Uncle Archie with that stuff. Yeah, actor, good guy, plays a bad guy. Or not so, or plays a complicated guy. Anyway, Uncle Archie will say a joke, and then he'll wait for the rest of the family to laugh. And there's you, and then there are younger kids than you, and you have a choice. You can either laugh and sort of hope and forget it, or you can just, you look around at your cousins, okay, whose turn is it to talk to Uncle Archie in front of everybody? Uncle Archie, you can't say that because blah, blah. And you're not saying that because you expect to change Uncle Archie's mind. Uncle Archie is done. But you don't want the kids who are listening to Uncle Archie laugh to think that's funny. And so that's the metaphor that we have with this. It is a free marketplace of ideas on Twitter very much, but just because you have a microphone doesn't mean anybody has to listen to you. And so that's what we believe in with this. I could say really stupid things here, and there should be social consequences. You should not want to have a drink with me after this. You should not want to work at my company. And in fact, you should probably call my company and get me fired. Like, that's legitimate. That's how society works, social contract. So we built this AI to do it because there is one piece of hate speech every other second. Hate. On Twitter. Every other second there's a piece of hate speech. And there's no way for my buddy, the designer, to watch all of them. So we're like, well, let's build an AI. How hard can that be? As it turns out, pretty hard. A speech as a human construct is pretty gnarly. There's just a lot of stuff going on, and we thought we could just rig it up and shoot it out there. How hard can it be? And so we went with this approach. Our AI journey started here, is what we call the bag of words. I'm already getting laughed at by the AI people, which is cool. It's totally fair. But this is a growth journey, okay? So what is the bag of words? The bag of words is I want you to think right now of the worst thing you could say about somebody, the worst name you could call them because they belong to a different group. Not that they smell bad or that they're dumb, but because they belong to a different group. I could call you a dirty... Think of that word. Okay, now put that word in a bag, and I'm going to go around and collect all of those words in a bag, and then we're just going to tell the machine that we built to find those words. How hard can it be? So hate is the N word, plus the K word, plus the F word, plus the D word, plus whatever words you're thinking of. There are lots of them, as it turns out, a horrifying amount. And here's the issue. Read that. Now, just presumptively, just from a gut feel, does this feel, raise your hand if this feels hateful or not. Couple hands in the air. Okay. This is a Drake lyric. So there's an issue with the bag of words. Speech is gnarly, and people use hateful speech in different ways, and we have to know how to catch that. Otherwise, we have lots of type 1 and type 2 errors, false positives and false negatives, and that sucks. That's a technical term for how you describe your machine learning when it's only 5% accurate. So we moved, we learned, we're growing. And we came up with another way to do it. The first is we did some more reading. We got smarter about the subject, and we came up with a more specific definition of hate speech. It wasn't just whether somebody used the N words, but it was really how people talked. And there's this system of language that we built, from a coded language all the way up through intended. Coded language being something like, those illegals don't understand how we live here. Well, what are they, you're sort of dancing around a concept that's racist, versus intention. I'm going to go shoot all the black people I meet. That's very clear intention, and everything in between. So we score that. And the other thing that we did, and you, if any user researchers in the audience, a few of you, you'll appreciate this. The other thing that we did was we talked to former extremists. This gentleman right here was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. This woman was a member of the Aryan Nation, and this gentleman was a former neo-Nazi. They were all people who got out of that lifestyle through life after hate. And they were in my office. That Iron Man arm is one floor below me. And if you ever want to talk about a weird day at the office, it's when you have former white supremacists in your office telling you all the language they use to describe people. That's a different day, I tell you. But it's super important from us that we got out of the bag of words, that we understood what words people were actually using. And so our ML got way better. When we launched an updated version, jumped radically to a point where we were really happy with it. It was something we could launch with. So far so good. We launched with the ML a little over a year ago. Whenever we tagged, whenever we responded to a piece of hate speech, the number of retweets on average reduced by about 64%. This is an old slide. It's now north of about 12 million impressions of hate speech that have been wiped off the map as a result of it, which is great. And what's also good is that, as it turns out, a lot of white supremacists are scared of confrontation. They react when people say, no, I don't think you should talk that way. And in fact, 1 out of every 5 tweets that we tag is then deleted by the author. So it's social contract working, which is great. And it's thousands of dollars to the people who are actually on the front lines pulling people who need to get pulled out of this out, which is nice. You may still be waiting for the answer to this question of why I'm talking to you about this. And it's primarily because I'm not here to drop knowledge on you, to teach you something about design and machine learning or AI. I'm not. That's kind of the head fake with this. I'm actually here to ask you something. I'm here to beg you to do something. And that is the greatest obstacles to a successful AI are only solvable by humans. Humans have to fix AI if it launches broken. Humans have to correct things. Humans have to learn from it and make it better. AI does, in fact, need to be designed, and it may not be the same design you think of visually or even systemically, but it's a design, and it is something that if you live in the design community, you have an aptitude for if you thought about it the right way. It needs to be monitored, and then it needs to be redesigned. It is iterative. You saw one example of that. We've done that 100 times since then. It is you who need to do that. There's no cavalry waiting to come do this. Jen talked a little bit about the good people, the well-intentioned people of Congress, who are, or the tech scions who are going to do. They're not. Here's my little view, my little truisms. They're not going to solve this. There's no Deus ex machina that's going to come in and fix this for us. It's got to be you, or it's not going to be anybody. It just isn't. And so I quote, as machine learning makes its way into all kinds of product systems, spaces, and experiences, we need to train a new generation of creators to harness the potential of machine learning and also to understand its implications. I actually stole that from the dSchool website, so a little side plug for you. I got you. We gotta stick together. So I will end with, you should do something good. How many here can code something that would be applied to machine learning? Raise your hand. What, like 8? I don't care. Don't care, not an excuse. Nope. The guy who came up with this idea couldn't code a lick, and then we built this. Couldn't code anything. Not up to him. It is up to you to find something important to you, partner with experts, and create time and space, and then design something. And here's the thing is that as busy as ML people are, if you ask one question, we have to answer you. Our sense of self-importance won't allow us to not. And at very least, we'll send you an article and say, hey, did you know that Google was doing this? Or I told you about this thing over here that you should read about, or something like that. But sometimes we'll go even further and go, hey, I'm not doing anything this weekend. Let me give it a whirl. All you gotta do is ask. So, with that, I will leave you the Twitter handle for We Counter Hate is We Counter Hate. And again, thanks for showing up for this. It's been a lot of fun.
Great. Okay, so we're gonna get set up for the panel where we can all ask questions, and I think it's actually my phone over here. So sorry. So just give us a minute, grab some more food and drinks, 5 minutes, and then we're gonna start the panel.